The sun had just started to rise over the hills of Nandoro, painting the sky with soft orange light. Birds sang above the mud houses, and the smell of wood smoke floated through the air. But inside one small hut, there was no joy, only silence and worry. Amina sat beside her mother's bed, holding her weak hand. Her mother's breathing was slow and her eyes were tired. Amina's heart ached. She had already sold her mats and jewelry, but still, it was not enough to buy the herbs the healer demanded. Every day she went to the market hoping someone would lend her money, but the villagers only shook their heads. Some pitied her, while others whispered that her mother's sickness was a curse. Amina ignored them and prayed every night. One afternoon, while she sat near the well crying quietly, a man's voice called out, "Why does a kind girl cry on such a beautiful day?" Amina looked up and saw Tendo the trader. He was older than her, kind-faced, and always greeted people politely. But he could not walk properly, one of his legs was weak and he used a stick to move around. He was known as a man who worked hard despite his pain. Amina wiped her tears and said, "My mother is dying and I have no way to save her." Tendo's eyes softened. "The healer's herbs are costly," he said, nodding slowly. "But life is precious." He was silent for a moment, then looked at her with care. "Amina, I have no family and my heart is lonely. If you agree to marry me, I will buy the medicine and bring it before nightfall." Amina's heart pounded. She stared at him in shock. "Marry you?" she whispered. The thought filled her with fear and confusion. She had never imagined marrying a man she did not love, and one who was crippled. But when she thought of her mother's weak breathing, her chest tightened. That night, Amina sat beside her mother, torn between love and sacrifice. Her mother, too weak to speak much, whispered, "Child, do not lose hope. Life always finds a way." But Amina knew time was running out. She could almost hear death knocking at their door. At dawn she went to Tendo's house. He was outside feeding his chickens, surprised to see her. Amina's eyes were full of tears, but her voice was steady. "If you promise to buy the medicine, I will be your wife." Tendo bowed his head respectfully. "I give you my word." True to his promise, he traveled to the healer that very morning and returned with the herbs wrapped in palm leaves. He handed them to Amina and said softly, "I do not ask you to love me today. I only ask for honesty and peace in our home." Amina took the medicine and rushed home. She prepared it carefully and gave it to her mother. 4 days she stayed by her side, hoping and praying. Slowly her mother's strength began to return. The color came back to her face and she smiled weakly at Amina. "You have saved me, my child." But Amina could not smile fully. She had saved her mother's life, yes, but she had lost her own freedom. The thought of marrying Tendo filled her with fear, not because he was cruel, but because she did not know if she could ever love him. When the wedding day arrived, the villagers gathered to watch. Some whispered, "She is marrying him for his money." Others said, "She is foolish to tie her life to a cripple." But Amina stood still, her hands trembling, her heart heavy. Tendo looked at her gently, not proud or boastful. "You have given me hope," he told her quietly. As they stood before the village elder, Amina felt a strange calmness. Perhaps fate had chosen this path for a reason. She remembered her mother's words, "Life always finds a way." That night, as the drums of the wedding faded and the moon rose over Nandoro, Amina sat outside her new home, listening to the wind in the trees. Tendo brought her a blanket so she would not be cold. He said softly, "You have done something great for love, Amina. One day, you will see that love has many shapes." Amina did not answer. But as she looked at the stars, she whispered a small prayer that maybe, just maybe, this choice born from pain could lead to something more than sacrifice. And somewhere deep inside, though she did not yet understand it, a seed of new hope began to grow. The wedding of Amina and Tendo took place on a quiet afternoon. Only a few people from the village came to watch. The air was filled with whispers, some out of curiosity, others out of judgment. Amina wore a simple white cloth, her face calm but her eyes distant. She did not smile once. The village women murmured among themselves, "She is only marrying him for money," while others said, "Poor girl, she had no choice." Tendo sat beside her with a gentle expression. He wore clean clothes and leaned on his walking stick, his crippled legs stretched to the side. He did not care about the whispers. His eyes were only on Amina. When the elder joined their hands and blessed the union, Tendo said softly, "May this house always know peace." Amina only nodded. After the ceremony, they walked back to Tendo's small but tidy home. It stood near the river, surrounded by banana trees and flowers. Amina noticed how everything inside was neat and cared for. Tendo showed her where the water pots were kept and told her, "You may rest here. You don't have to work until your mother is strong again." His voice was soft and full of respect. In the first few days Amina kept to herself. She cooked quietly and spoke little. She often sat by the door, staring toward her mother's hut, missing the life she once had. Every time she looked at Tendo she saw the man who had bought her freedom with marriage. Her heart was heavy with guilt and confusion. But Tendo never complained. He moved slowly with his stick, doing what he could around the house. When Amina forgot to cook or was late to fetch water, he never scolded her. Instead he said, "We are both learning to live together. It will take time." Those words surprised her. She expected pride, anger, or demands, but instead she found patience. Every morning Tendo brought fruit for her mother. He walked all the way to the healer's hut to ask how she was recovering. He made sure the medicine never ran out. When Amina's mother grew strong enough to walk again, Tendo smiled and said, "Your mother is brave, just like you." Amina began to notice little things about him. He rose early even before sunrise and worked with his hands though his leg pained him. He repaired baskets, made toys for the children and sold them at the market. The villagers who once mocked him respected his honesty. One day Amina followed him to the market for the first time. She saw how he greeted everyone with warmth, never letting his weakness slow him down. When a little boy fell, Tendo stopped to help him up even though it made his leg ache. Amina watched in silence, feeling something stir inside her. That evening when they returned home, Tendo noticed she was quiet. "You have not spoken much," he said. Amina hesitated, then said softly, "You are kinder than I thought." He smiled. "Kindness is free. I give it because I was once given none." His words stayed in her heart for days. A week later, as she sat outside washing clothes, her mother came to visit. She hugged Amina tightly and whispered, "This man has done more for me than anyone else. You may not love him now, but do not close your heart to him." Amina looked toward the doorway where Tendo sat carving a small wooden bird. His face was calm, focused, and full of peace. She realized she had not seen him angry even once. When he noticed her watching, he handed her the bird and said, "For you. I made it this morning." She took it shyly. "It's beautiful." He chuckled. "It looks like you when you are quiet." For the first time Amina smiled a little. It surprised even her. The smile was small but real. That night as they ate together she asked him, "Why did you choose me?" He looked at her kindly and said, "Because when I saw you crying by the well, I saw a heart that still hoped even when the world gave it nothing. I wanted to protect that hope." Amina could not reply. Her heart ached with a strange warmth. She went to bed that night thinking of his words. Days turned into weeks. The villagers who once laughed began to notice how happy Tendo looked when Amina was near. They saw her bringing him tea, helping him walk, and smiling more often. Gossip turned into quiet respect. One evening when the sun set behind the hills, Amina sat by the doorway, watching Tendo polish his walking stick. The light of the fire touched his face, and she saw not a crippled man, but a soul strong and kind. He looked at her and said softly, "Amina, I know this marriage was not your choice, but I will never hurt you. You are free to leave if ever you wish, but I will still bless your path." Her eyes filled with tears. No one had ever spoken to her with such gentleness. She looked down and said, "I will not leave." Tendo smiled a deep, peaceful smile. And in that moment, though Amina did not yet call it love, something inside her heart began to change. The man she had once feared had become the one person she trusted most. That night as she lay in bed, the wind blew softly through the open window. For the first time since her marriage, Amina felt at peace. The home that had once felt like a cage now felt safe, not because of walls but because of the man who had filled it with kindness. Days passed like gentle wind over the hills of Nandoro. The sun rose, the roosters crowed, and the smell of roasted maize filled the air. Life slowly began to change for Amina. She no longer woke up with sadness in her heart. Each morning she heard the soft sound of Tendo's walking stick tapping on the floor as he moved around the house, beginning his work before the first light touched the sky. Tendo spent his days carving small wooden toys, little animals, flutes, and dolls. He worked carefully even though his hands sometimes trembled from pain. Children from the village often came to watch him, laughing as he shaped their favorite animals from dry wood. He always gave them a smile and said, "If your hands are busy creating, your heart will never grow tired." Amina used to sit in the corner watching quietly as he worked. One morning he looked up and said, "Would you like to learn?" She hesitated then nodded. He handed her a small knife and a block of wood. Her first carving looked nothing like the dove she had imagined, but Tendo laughed softly. "It is not the shape that matters," he said. "It is the patience." Day by day Amina practiced beside him. Sometimes she cut her finger or dropped the knife, and Tendo would gently take her hand and wrap it in cloth. "You will get better," he would say kindly. "You are already better than yesterday." His words made her smile. As time passed, laughter slowly returned to their home. Amina found herself talking more, even teasing Tendo when he dropped something or took too long to finish a toy. He always laughed, shaking his head, and said, "You are becoming quite bold, my wife." In the evenings when the work was done, they would sit outside watching the sunset. The sky over Nandoro turned golden, and the air smelled of wet earth after the day's heat. Sometimes Tendo would hum old songs, his voice deep and calm. Amina listened quietly, feeling peace she had never known before. One afternoon an old widow named Binta came to their house, her eyes full of worry. Her roof had fallen during a storm and she had no food. Tendo called Amina to bring water for her. Then he went inside, took a bag of maize and handed it to Binta. "Take this," he said. "You need it more than we do." Binta's eyes filled with tears. "Bless you, Tendo," she said. "Even with your pain, you give more than strong men." After she left, Amina looked at him with surprise. "You gave her our maize. What will we eat?" Tendo smiled gently. "The river never runs dry when it gives water," he said. "Kindness returns in its own way." That night, as Amina cooked their simple meal, she couldn't stop thinking about his words. She realized that though his body was weak, his spirit was strong, stronger than any man she had ever known. One morning, as Tendo worked on a large wooden horse for a child's birthday, his leg began to hurt badly. He tried to hide it, but Amina noticed. She went to him and said firmly, "Rest. Let me finish this one." He looked at her in surprise, then smiled. "You are learning too fast," he said. She grinned. "You taught me patience, remember?" From that day they began to work together, she sanding the toys, he carving them. They sold them at the market, and soon people started calling them the happy couple. Even those who once whispered unkindly began to speak with respect. When Tendo struggled to walk to the market, Amina pushed a small cart so he wouldn't have to carry his goods. Villagers saw them and smiled, saying, "Love walks stronger than legs." Sometimes after a long day Tendo would sit outside, his legs stretched out, looking at the stars. Amina would bring him tea and sit beside him. He would tell her stories about when he was young, how he hurt his leg in a fall while helping a friend, and how that friend never came back. "For a long time," he said, "I thought my life was over. But now I see it was only beginning." Amina felt something warm in her heart as she listened. She no longer saw him as a crippled man. She saw a man who refused to give up, who gave kindness even when life gave him pain. One evening, as the moon rose bright and full, Amina looked at Tendo and said softly, "You are not weak, Tendo. You are the strongest man I know." He looked at her with surprise, then smiled, his eyes shining. "And you, Amina, have given my heart legs to walk again." They both laughed, the sound mixing with the night breeze. From that night, their home was never silent again. Laughter, kindness, and love filled it like the morning sun. And though Tendo's steps were slow, Amina walked beside him, not out of duty, but out of a love that had grown quietly, like a small seed that found good soil and light. The villagers began to tell stories of them. The poor girl who married a crippled man not for gold but for grace, and the man who taught everyone that true strength does not live in muscles or bones, but in a kind heart that never gives up. The night began like any other in Nandoro. The air was heavy, the clouds low and dark. Amina and Tendo sat outside their small house listening to the crickets. But soon the wind began to howl. The sky rumbled like an angry drum, and the trees bent as if bowing to a great power. Amina looked up, worried. "Tendo, the storm is coming," she said. Before long, rain began to fall, first softly, then harder, until it felt like the heavens had opened. The wind tore through the village, slamming doors and lifting roofs. People screamed in the distance. The sound of thunder shook the earth, and water rushed through the streets like a river. Amina grabbed the door and tried to close it, but the wind was too strong. Tendo, struggling with his weak leg, pushed beside her until the door finally shut. But through the noise they could hear voices crying for help. Children, old people, neighbors. Tendo's face grew pale. "We must help them," he said. Amina tried to stop him. "You can't even walk properly, Tendo. The storm will sweep you away." But Tendo shook his head. "If we stay safe while others die, then what good is our safety?" Before she could argue, he grabbed a wooden stick and opened the door. Rain poured over them immediately, soaking their clothes and faces. Amina followed him into the dark storm, holding his arm tightly. The village was chaos. Trees had fallen, walls had collapsed, and people were wading through deep water, crying out for help. Lightning flashed, showing faces full of fear. Tendo moved as fast as he could, limping but determined. He shouted, "Hold on. We are coming." His voice was barely heard over the storm. They reached a house that had fallen. A woman was trapped under a wooden beam. Amina ran to her, trying to lift it, but it was too heavy. Tendo knelt beside her, his face straining with pain as he pushed. "Together," he said. Amina pushed with all her strength. The beam moved just enough for the woman to crawl out. She was bleeding but alive. "Bless you both," she whispered before fainting. Without stopping, Amina and Tendo helped her to a dry spot under a large tree. Then they heard another cry, a child's voice. They turned and saw a little boy clinging to a broken fence as the water rose around him. Amina's heart jumped. "He'll drown," she shouted. Tendo didn't hesitate. He handed his stick to Amina and waded into the flood. The water pushed against him, almost knocking him down. His leg trembled with pain, but he kept going step by step until he reached the boy. "Hold on to me," he shouted. The boy clung to his neck, crying. Tendo turned slowly, pushing through the water. Amina ran forward and grabbed the boy's hand, pulling both of them to safety. She hugged the child tightly, her tears mixing with the rain. By now the water was up to their waists. The storm roared even louder, tearing the roofs from houses. Tendo's breathing was heavy. His strength was fading, but his eyes stayed fierce. "There are more," he said, pointing to another house where people were shouting. Amina wanted to say no, to take him back home, but she saw the fire in his eyes, the fire of kindness that had always burned inside him. She nodded and followed. They worked for hours, helping people escape through windows, pulling children from the mud, guiding the weak to higher ground. Everyone in Nandoro saw them, the crippled man and his wife, fighting against the storm like heroes. At last the rain began to slow. The thunder moved away and the sky softened. The village was silent except for the sound of dripping water and crying children. People gathered under the few roofs that still stood, holding each other. Amina turned to Tendo, ready to tell him they had done enough. But he was leaning on his stick, his body shaking. "Tendo," she said softly. He tried to smile. "They're safe now," he whispered. Then his knees gave way and he fell into her arms. Amina screamed, "Tendo. No, please stay with me." She laid him on the ground, holding his face. His eyes fluttered open, weak and tired. Rain still fell softly on his cheeks. "Amina," he said faintly. "You are brave." Tears streamed down her face. "Don't leave me, Tendo. Please don't leave me. You are my heart now." She held him close, her arms trembling. The villagers gathered around them, their faces filled with worry. Someone brought a blanket, another brought water. But Amina didn't move. She kept whispering his name again and again, praying for him to wake up. The night passed slowly. When the first light of dawn touched the village, the storm was gone. The air smelled of wet earth and smoke. The people began to rebuild their homes, their spirits heavy but thankful to be alive. Tendo lay inside their small house, still and pale. Amina sat beside him, holding his hand. Then she felt a small movement, his fingers pressing hers weakly. She gasped and looked down. His eyes opened slowly and a faint smile appeared on his lips. "You see," he whispered, "the river that gives water never runs dry." Amina laughed and cried at the same time. "You foolish man," she said, tears falling. "You nearly broke my heart." He smiled faintly. "But it still beats," he whispered. Outside, the sun rose higher, shining over the broken village, and over the couple who had saved so many lives. That day the people of Nandoro said, "If love could fight storms, then Amina and Tendo have already defeated the sky itself." And from that day they were not just husband and wife. They were a story that would be told in every corner of Nandoro about courage, kindness, and the strength that lives in true love. Morning light spread softly over Nandoro. The storm was gone, leaving behind broken houses and fallen trees, but the village was alive. Birds returned to the sky, and the air smelled fresh again. In a small hut near the river, Amina sat beside Tendo, holding his hand tightly. He had not woken up since the night of the flood. His breathing was weak and Amina had not slept. She whispered, "You must wake up, my love. Everyone needs you. I need you." Her eyes were red from crying, but she refused to give up. As the sun rose higher, a soft voice broke the silence. "Amina." She gasped and turned. Tendo's eyes were open. He looked tired but peaceful. Amina let out a cry of joy and hugged him gently. "You're awake. Thank the heavens." Tendo smiled weakly. "Did we save them all?" Amina nodded, tears falling down her face. "Yes, every one of them. You saved them, Tendo. You saved Nandoro." Word spread quickly through the village that Tendo had woken up. Within an hour, people began gathering outside their small hut. Men, women, and children stood in silence, waiting to see the man who had risked his life for them. When Tendo appeared at the door, supported by Amina, the people began to clap and cheer. "Long live Tendo," shouted a young boy. "Long live Amina." Elders came forward, bowing their heads. "We owe you our lives," said one old man. "Without you many would have died." Tendo looked at them humbly. "We only did what any heart should do," he said softly. Amina stood beside him, her eyes shining. The people surrounded them, bringing gifts, baskets of grain, fruits, and small wooden carvings. One woman handed Amina a necklace made of river shells. "You were once called the poor girl," she said, smiling. "But now, you are the woman with the brave husband." Amina laughed gently. "No," she said, looking at Tendo. "He may be brave, but he is not the only one. We were brave together." That evening, the whole village gathered under the big tree near the river. They lit fires and cooked food, sharing stories of the storm and how Amina and Tendo had saved so many lives. Children played, their laughter echoing through the night. Tendo sat beside Amina, his hand resting on hers. "Do you remember," he said softly, "the day we first met? You didn't even look at me." Amina smiled. "I remember. I was only thinking of my mother's sickness. I never thought I would one day thank the man who saved her." He chuckled quietly. "And now?" She looked at him with love in her eyes. "Now I thank the man who saved an entire village." Tendo blushed slightly, shaking his head. "No, my dear. You did too. You pulled people from the water. You held me when I fell. You gave me courage when I had none left." Amina looked into the firelight, her voice soft and full of emotion. "I once married for duty," she said, "but I found love instead." Around them, the villagers listened. Her words touched every heart. Even the old and weary smiled. The wind passed through the leaves above them, whispering gently as if agreeing with her. For days the people worked together to rebuild the village. Amina and Tendo helped in every way they could. Tendo, though weak, carved new beams for houses and repaired roofs. Amina cooked for the workers and cared for the sick. Together they brought Nandoro back to life. One morning the chief of the village came to visit. He carried a staff carved with the symbol of leadership. "Tendo and Amina," he said, "you have taught us all something greater than strength, the power of love and kindness. From this day your story will be told to every child born in Nandoro." Tendo bowed his head in gratitude. Amina smiled humbly. "If our story can remind people to care for each other," she said, "then our hearts are full." Years passed, but their names were never forgotten. When the river overflowed again in later seasons, the villagers always remembered that night, the night when a crippled man and his poor wife saved them all. They built a small stone by the riverbank with their names carved on it, Tendo and Amina, the hearts that loved beyond fear. Children often played near the stone. When the wind passed through the trees, the leaves would whisper softly as if carrying an old secret. Elders would smile and say, "Listen, the wind tells the story of Tendo and Amina. True strength lives not in the body but in the heart." On quiet evenings, Amina would sit by the river, holding Tendo's hand. They would watch the water move gently under the golden sky. "Do you hear that?" Amina would say. Tendo nodded. "Yes," he'd whisper. "It's the wind, reminding us that love never fades." And so, in Nandoro, their love became more than a memory. It became a song carried by the breeze, a story of sacrifice, courage, and the power of a heart that chooses kindness over everything else.